Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the HP Spectre X360 13T on the left and the 15T on the right. Now these are both 2-in-1s with pen input capability. The pen is optional in the case of the 15T. They are similar in price, but they are not similar with regard to when they actually launched. The 13T has been my daily driver since October of 2019. I still stand behind the fact that I believe this is the best 2-in-1 of its kind on the market in terms of form factor, all of the features, best display, everything you could possibly, or I could possibly want if you share that in common. And then, of course, the 15T is a newer product that launched several months ago here in 2020 and offers more horsepower with regard to processor, as well as a dedicated GPU and a larger display. Of course, pricing is similar, yet not identical. This machine originally retailed, the build I have, for over $2,000, but the one you'll find at Best Buy, I think around $1,800 or $1,900. Now that's on sale for roughly $1,500 because a Tiger Lake refresh is on the way, but I don't think we'll see that until the first quarter of next year, which isn't that far away, but keep that in mind. So at roughly $1,500, I do think this machine is a steal if you need something today. This machine, on the other hand, retails, at least at the time of my review, the retail was $2,000. I think it is on sale, though, now for $1,800. So they're still really close in terms of pricing, really similar in terms of design cue. A little over a pound of weight separates the two. Of course, the 15T has a 15.6-inch 4K AMOLED display, gorgeous screen, whereas the 13T has a 13.3-inch 4K AMOLED display. I do actually prefer the AMOLED here, and that's just because it's larger, so you can leverage the resolution, I would say, in a better fashion. In addition to that, you do have the benefit, as I've mentioned, of not dedicated, or rather of having dedicated graphics on board, and that's because we do have an NVIDIA GTX 1650 Ti with Max-Q design. And what that means is that you actually can game here. Now, you're not going to game in 4K, you're going to game in 1080p. You're also going to get a benefit from that NVIDIA GPU when it comes to video rendering or photo editing. Now, is the margin tremendous? No, it's fairly close. In fact, I would say it boils down to anywhere from 10 to 15% in terms of performance. I'm talking about the CPU that each of these has, and then in addition to the CPU, the actual benefit of having that GPU. So the quad-core Ice Lake processor inside the 13T is still very good. Of course, the Tiger Lake one that I mentioned is going to outclass it substantially, especially the Iris Plus graphics, which were fantastic at the time of the launch of this machine. In fact, the best we'd ever seen from integrated graphics with Intel. But I am comparing it to a machine that has a 6-core processor, not a 4-core, and in addition to that, does have a dedicated GPU. And so again, it does equate to about, I would say, a 10 to 15% performance increase. But whether or not that's going to be meaningful to you personally is really going to matter on a case-by-case use basis. Now, if I were purchasing one of these to be my only computer, it would be the 15T. And that's because that extra horsepower in terms of CPU and GPU are incredibly relevant if it's your only system. Because this is not my only system, the 13T was more ideal. In fact, when I purchased this, I thought this was really a dream come true for travel, and it is. However, with the pandemic, had I known, I would have waited, quite frankly, because I haven't been able to do any traveling because of, well, the pandemic, and I'm not going to get into any more than that. But when it comes to battery life, these two are very similar. You're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 hours unplugged, depending on what you're trying to do with them. In terms of their actual displays, I already stated, best in class with those AMOLED 4K displays. I personally do prefer the 16:9 aspect ratio. HP is about to launch, which I will be covering, a brand new machine, a 14-inch Spectre that is going to move away from the 16:9, and I know a lot of you will appreciate the taller aspect ratio, but I actually want to be able to watch my native content for my channel in 16:9. So for me, this is still preferable. I'm not looking for the additional height offered by the new machine, but that doesn't mean that that won't still be of interest. I also am not in love with the fact that the new offering is not 4K. And that's because HP is going directly after, of course, Microsoft with their Surface laptop. And I get it. It makes sense because right now HP does, in my opinion, make one of the best two-in-one machines on the market in either of these capacities. So the 14-inch is going to fit in nicely for those of you who do not like the 16:9 aspect ratio. And then in addition to that, you will get the benefit of having Tiger Lake, which that new processor has a very large gap in performance. I mean, reported to be somewhere around 30 some odd % gain. We'll see what that is in real world. But either way, as I was saying, if you're going to only have one computer in your house, go with the larger 15T. Again, battery life is similar. Keyboard is basically identical, but you are getting a numerical keypad on the far right. I do think that both trackpads work very well. I know a lot of you out there wished these trackpads were larger. That's another thing that HP is addressing with the new models that they're refreshing. But we're living in the now, and that's why I'm sharing two machines you can purchase as of today. The audio on the 13T is mediocre. The 15T is better, but not by a huge margin. It's louder because it's a bigger machine. Both of these will get hot under load. So, you're not going to fry an egg on them, but I wouldn't say that you'll comfortably keep this on your lap if, again, you're pushing either of them. So video rendering or photo editing or gaming, they're going to get hot. So keep that in mind. When it comes to I/O, both are pretty well suited. Thunderbolt 3 on board for both of them. I'll actually close up the machines, but before I do that, I want to point out both have fingerprint scanners, both have IR cameras that are compatible with Windows Hello, which is great. The webcams are not fantastic. They're actually exactly the same from my experience, so they're a wash. The microphone array is good, but when it comes to video conferencing with these, the webcam is something HP does need to make better, especially here in a pandemic. But overall, again, I still really like both of these, and I'll get into which. I already kind of answered which I would pick to a degree because it is a secondary, not a primary, so I would pick this, but there's more to that opinion than just that. In terms of other things on the keyboard before I go to the body and the I/O, love that both of these have a dedicated mute button that actually shows you that with an LED that it's muted. A lot of people think that's not a big deal. I think it is a big deal. You also have that with your microphone mute because it's a pain in the ass to go to look to see if things are muted on screen when you can just have a dedicated button. Wish more manufacturers would pick up on this. It's smart, it makes sense, and I honestly don't think I would entertain laptops. I'm not saying I would swear all of them off, but if they don't offer me that, it is a mark against them. So I've talked about the webcam being meh, battery life being very similar on them, even though one is clearly more portable, meaning the 13T, and in addition to the additional horsepower with the CPU and GPU, only a little more than a pound larger. It's a pretty good compromise, especially since they're so close in price. Now let's talk about I/O, because a lot of you are wondering, is this going to have the ports I need? So first and foremost, the 15T has two Type-C ports. Only one of them is Thunderbolt 3 capable. So keep that in mind. You do have a kill switch for the webcam. You do have a Type-A USB 3 port and a micro SD card slot right there for reading micro SD cards. On the back of the machine, completely clean. All of your ventilation is right here at the base and on the sides. But as I mentioned, this machine will still get hot. One thing you will get here that you will not with the 13T is a full-size HDMI out on the machine. I think that's a great thing to have. Some of you know that you need it, so if you do, that's another thing in favor of the 15T. You also have a dedicated, of course, mic and headphone jack. It's a combo jack, and there is the power connector right there, which is a 135 watt supply, dedicated, and of course the power button on this hinge over here, or on this cut, I should say, on this angular cut. That's pretty much it. This is, in my opinion, the best 2-in-1 of its kind right now. Again, in this class, I mean, to be a little over 4 pounds and have all of the power that it has, this really could be my one machine to do everything. Granted, with gaming, 1080p, you're not going to be doing anything beyond pushing medium settings at best, and possibly low, depending on the title that you're trying to drive. But that's still really good for a machine that isn't a dedicated gaming laptop, but really is trying to be the best of all worlds. And when it comes to the flexibility of the display, being able to flip it around and put it into whatever posture you desire, that's also, of course, the beauty of having the 2-in-1. The inking experience, by the way, on these machines is pretty much identical. So for those of you that are wondering, is one better than the other? The answer is no. It really is essentially the same experience. Now we move over to the machine that's 1.5 pounds less, a little under 3 pounds. And again, this is all about portability for me. And what I love about the 13T that I can't say about the 15T, even though the 15T is the powerhouse, but not by that much, as I've stated through the video, is that I have a lot of camera bags that are designed to carry a tablet. And in most cases, that is an iPad. Guess what? This can fit in those bags. Before HP came out with the 13T, no 13-inch laptop, or pretty much, I would say, no Ultrabook could fit in those compartments. So the fact that this can go where a tablet would makes it even more desirable. It means I'm not carrying an extra bag or switching over to a backpack. Now with this, the bigger machine, the 15T, I will still need a backpack style bag or a dedicated laptop case. So that's one of the things I love about the 13T. We're keeping it small, but we're not sacrificing a lot, except for really the speakers being somewhat awful on the 13T. And hopefully in the refresh, that will get addressed, just like heat dissipation and other good stuff. So here, very similar I/O. Micro SD card slot, dedicated kill switch for the webcam, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, which those are also how you're going to charge this machine. So a 65-watt Type-C charger is included. That's another reason I really like this, but I completely understand that when you go to a more powerful system with a higher power processor and GPU, you do need a higher power source. So, that's part of the trade-off of going Ultrabook versus really laptop, and that applies to any machine, whether it's a 2-in-1 or not. So 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, but that's really a matter of power delivery as well being there. Your power button right there on the other hinge, very similar design. And then, of course, the 2-in-1 headphone microphone jack, and then, of course, your USB Type A port, USB 3 Type A port right there, which does have the little hinge to cover it, keep dust out. I like that. Some people hate that. It's a matter of personal opinion. Very similar design, heat dissipation here, heat dissipation on the sides, but this does get hotter than the 15T. So I mentioned the inking experience. Inking on both of these is fine. If you want to take a look at an inking demo, I have one of the 15T that my fiance was kind enough to do, and she did a great job. I think really the problem with all Windows 2-in-1s, and this is, so it's not specific to HP, is that the software is just not great. My fiance was using Sketchbook, Autodesk Sketchbook, and her experience with the palm rejection and all of those things, she just ran into a lot of issues. So that's not an HP problem. That's a Windows 10 problem. That's an Autodesk problem. And there's a reason there are specifically designed platforms for artists, and these 2-in-1s are kind of a gray space for people that want to have the capability maybe to do markups, redline, annotations, things like that, and then some art on the side. But these are, in my opinion, they're not ideal, either of them, for artists. Students, yeah, I think there is definitely a space for them. In fact, I think they're great for students. I think that's one of the best audiences. This, by the way, is the HP Tilt pen. This is an optional pen that was more expensive than the standard pen that was included with the 13T that uses a quadruple A battery. I went with this just because it does charge via Type-C connection. So the same charger you're using for your laptop, you can charge your pen. I liked that. Some people will prefer having the pen that uses a quadruple A battery, because as long as they carry around a bunch of batteries, they'll never be out of battery. So something to keep in mind. But again, when it comes to inking, same experience. It's just here you have a larger display, which I think will benefit those of you that do plan on doing any form of artwork with it. I mean, having a larger display is beneficial, obviously, for obvious reasons. Larger total space to work with, that's a given. But beyond that, again, inking is going to be pretty much identical. The processor power difference, GPU, doesn't make a difference in terms of latency. Maybe we'll see that with Tiger Lake, I don't know. But the fact of the matter that I pointed to before about just application software not being great for Windows 10 for inking, that is more of a limitation than anything that Intel can come up with in terms of processor power, or NVIDIA could try to complement with GPU power. So keep that in mind. Of course, I've made it abundantly clear that when it comes to overall capability, the 15T is the winner. But of course, when it comes to portability, the 13T just kills it. And I say that because, again, it's the difference between me having to carry 2 bags of gear when the day comes that I can finally travel again. And this Earth is back to some semblance of normalcy. Hopefully that'll be very soon. But either way, you cannot go wrong with either of these machines. Now, if you're in love with the 13T, again, on sale at $1,500. It's a steal, in my opinion. My model was over $2,000. Granted, I do have the 2 terabyte NVMe in here, which I think is worth every penny if you need the extra storage space. But it is an expensive upgrade. The $1,500 model I'm mentioning comes with the Intel 1 terabyte NVMe. Both of these have 16 gigs of RAM. Both of them, as I was stating, if you are going with the non-custom build of the 13T, have that 1 terabyte Intel NVMe drive. So very similar builds. It's just a matter of, do you need the 6-core processor? Do you need the NVIDIA GPU? And if you do, then you should go with it, because as I stated, if it's a primary machine, and if this was going to be my only machine, I would pick the 15T over it. I like the display more. I think it overall does more justice to the 4K resolution. I think that having the added bonus of a more powerful CPU and GPU combo, for me as a content creator and gamer, is more beneficial. But at the same time, I would never game on either of these, even though you could game on either of them. I would be gaming on my dedicated desktop system. So that's why, context is key for each user. So if you plan to do any gaming, this can game. Don't get me wrong, Iris Plus was a huge step for integrated, but it's still not going to come close to the 1650 Ti with Max-Q design with 4 gigs of dedicated RAM. In the same vein, as I mentioned, when it comes to editing in Vegas or Photoshop, these are really close in performance. Yes, the 15T outperforms it. Whether you go with acceleration through the Intel CPU or the NVIDIA GPU, of course, the NVIDIA GPU is going to give you better yields than the 6-core Intel CPU. But again, the margin it's not night and day between these two. And that's why I keep coming back to the 13T. So I'm really excited to see what HP puts together with the new refresh with Tiger Lake under the hood, because if the performance is what it's sounding like, then Intel is stepping up their game because they know they need to. ARM is climbing, up their back. AMD has been encroaching on their territory for quite some time, especially now in mobile. So if Tiger Lake isn't that ace, then I don't know what to say about Intel. It's not a bright spot for them. And I'm an Intel fan, but if they aren't keeping up, if they aren't giving us the bleeding edge, but still charging us the bleeding edge price, of course they will pay the price for doing so. But I expect the Tiger Lake refresh of the 13T to be my next machine. Again, nothing is set in stone. I'm a huge fan of Lenovo's C940 lineup. I will be covering the Tiger Lake refresh of that, and that's going to be a very compelling lineup of machines as well. But again, if you're looking at what's available today, you can't go wrong with either of these. In my opinion, again, portability wins the day for me, but that's because I have a powerhouse desktop at home. That is if I ever leave home again. If I was trying to travel, this would be, I mean, that's the reason I bought this machine, was that it was the nearly zero compromise travel Ultrabook of my dreams, basically, just with really bad audio and a mediocre webcam. This is just the bigger version of it. Again, similar battery life, and a bigger power brick, a bigger overall footprint. Both won't fry eggs, as I said earlier, but they will get very hot. But I just don't think you can go wrong. As long as your expectations are in line, they're realistic, and you understand that neither is perfect. And you also understand that, of course, as always, with everything I review on this channel, something better is always coming. So if you're going to beat yourself up about that, and you're going to say, oh, I'm waiting for the next generation, just remember, you might be waiting forever, which means you end up with nothing. And I'm not a fan of that. In the same vein, I would not buy the 13T 2 weeks prior to the refresh being launched unless you're getting an amazing deal. Same applies to this machine. I think right now at $1,800, this is a great buy. It's really hard to beat the overall performance, capability, and specs that you're getting in a machine that's this form factor. And again, traditionally, a little over 4 pounds wouldn't give you desktop class replacing performance, but it does here, depending on what kind of desktop you would have. I'm talking about the average consumer, not someone who is a gaming enthusiast who's spending $5 grand on a brand new desktop build. Same applies here. Basically, if you're going to compare this to what you would get from Microsoft or Apple, it craps all over it. So both of these machines do. I mean, from a value perspective, Microsoft and Apple can't touch this. Only Lenovo can, and even still, Lenovo's not giving me the AMOLED display that I love that both of these has. So I already told my contact at HP, if I could trade these machines right now, I would take this. And the reason being is because I'm not going anywhere. So walking around the house, editing, encoding, photo editing, I'd rather have this machine because I'm not traveling. But as I stated, in a perfect world, which doesn't exist, I'm really just looking for the one we used to have, not this new normal, this would be my go-to, as it was back in October when I purchased it and was on the fence and wasn't really sure. So I hope this clarifies for everyone. Right now, if I had to pick, just because of the pandemic, I would go with the 15T. But if there were no pandemic, you better believe the 13T is my daily driver, as it has been, and it's going to go back to being, because this machine is going back. This is a loaner. This one I own. But, if HP said to me, hey, you can ship back your 13T, hold on to this, I'd have no problem with that, because again, for being stuck in the house, this is the more flexible, powerful machine. And right now, they're so close in price that I would pick the 15T every time. But that's, again, because of the pandemic. So I hope that's abundantly clear. That's really the premise. If it's your only machine and you're stuck in the house, the 15T is the better pick. But if you want something that's really going to be able to go anywhere and do just about anything within, again, realistic expectation, the 13T is the winner for me personally, and still remains so. And as I've stated, really looking forward to what Tiger Lake has to offer. And again, just to realize that footprint difference, you see it here. And this is why the 13T fits in my camera bag in the tablet slot, and the 15T requires a camera backpack that has a dedicated compartment for a standard 15-inch laptop, even though it's basically almost a pound lighter than a standard 15-inch laptop. Drink it in. What can I say? And yes, I said battery life is close. Battery life is a little bit better with the 13T. It should be. It's an Ultrabook. But I was surprised how well the 15T performed, because, more power requires more power. That's the way things work. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.